right, everybody. So welcome back to another edition of the Leadership Blend. This is our 5th episode, so I'm beyond excited. I'm so glad that you tuned in. I'm glad that you're getting the information that you need. All right, so in this episode, we're moving forward, but in order to get to where we really need to be, we probably need to go back. So for that cause, I'm going to go back to the beginning, but y'all know how I do. So we're going to kind of zoom through it. But of course, you're welcome to go back and watch episodes 1 through 4 and get the information that you actually need in detail. So let's start there. So first and foremost, we started with the 5 W's: the who, the what, the when, the why, and the where. So what does that all mean? It means exactly what it says. In the beginning, typically people feel like they're called to leadership. And when they're called to leadership, this looks like any number of things, whether it be having a church, whether it be having a evangelistic type ministry where you're in the highways and the byways, or whether it be you partnering with somebody. In any event, if you start this venture, God is probably either giving you a vision or some insight to meet people where they are, a specific group of people that have probably been taxed to your hand. So how do you get that all down? You start with the 5 W's, the simplest place to start. And you answer those questions. So it's who? Who has God called you to? Has He called you to kids? Has He called you to adults? Has He called you to military? Where has He called you to? Did He call you to the city? Did He call you to the suburbs? Did He call you to rural areas? When? When did He call you? Did He tell you to do it in this season? Did He tell you to do it in another season? Now again, when it gets to time, we understand Ecclesiastes 3:1, to everything is a time and a season, all that good stuff. But we're also talking about man's timing. So when you go to sit down and actually write your business plan, you're going to have some actual dates. So if you say, hey, God has called me to children and you want to start a daycare, which I think the example was Jesus Children's Daycare was the example. And she said that God had called her to start a kids ministry. So she decided to have a daycare. So when she was deciding the daycare, she had to decide about the timing. And with that, she had to think like a businesswoman. Okay, when are the kids in school? When are the kids out of school? Why does that make a difference? It makes a difference because it's about the influx. So if she starts school when the kids are out of school, the influx is probably not going to be as high as if she were to start school when the kids were out of school. Why? Because parents are trying to find some place to put their kids when they're out of school versus when they start going back to school, the kids are in school. So those kinds of things are the things you have to think about when you're thinking about the when. The how. How do you plan on doing this? Do you plan on having investors? Do you plan on having people give? Do you plan on taking out loans? These are the kinds of things you think about when you have the 5 W's. The 5 W's are only preparing you to get you to the next step. The next step is your mission statement. And everybody knows how I feel about a mission statement. Your mission statement is kind of your synopsis of what your organization does. And typically it's 1 or 2 sentences. Now at the max, it could be a paragraph, but remember, your mission statement is supposed to be your elevator pitch. And for the elevator pitch, in ideology, it's if you were to get in an elevator with somebody you know has a big checkbook or somebody you know that has a lot of influence and you get the opportunity to pitch your organization to them, what are you going to say? Because you don't have time to ramble. Let's say you get an elevator. I always use Oprah. Let's say you get an elevator with Oprah and you say, Oprah, look, I have this great organization and I think you really should be a part of it, or I think you really should have us on your show. And she says, hey, tell me about your organization. You don't have time to start rambling. So the easiest thing you're going to remember is your mission statement. So your mission statement should be 3 things, or should or shouldn't be 3 things. Number 1, your mission statement should probably be no longer than a paragraph. 2 sentences max. Number 2, it should be something even a 12-year-old can memorize or a 12-year-old would understand. And number 3, it should be something that you can recite under duress or in a high-pressure situation. So that's what your mission statement should be. So when you're in that elevator and she asks you for information on your organization, you should be able to rattle off your mission statement because that's going to be the easiest thing to remember. All right, next, your vision statement. Now, your vision statement and your mission statement are 2 different things. Your vision statement is probably projected for 5 to 10 years. Your mission statement is probably 6 months to a year, 3 years probably max. You will probably revisit your mission statement before you ever have to touch your vision statement. And remember, your vision statement is just that. When God gives you a vision, there's no timeline on it. This is the end game. So that's kind of the ideology behind the vision statement, that this is the end game. So with the Jesus Children's Daycare, the vision statement was encompassing saying that she wanted to have daycares across the East and West Coast. So that's her long-term goal. Her short-term or her mission statement says something along the lines of she wanted to be able to have kids in a confined spacing teaching them Christian values in a safe Christian environment. That's a mission statement. So again, mission statement, 1 year to 3 years. Vision statement, 5 years to 10 years. Then you get into your core values. Your core values are words that should be synonymous with what your organization does. And again, because we're talking about ministry, it's probably words like love, compassion, encompassment, empathy, words that will be synonymous with your church or your organization. And you don't want to have any more than 6 words, six core value words. No less than 4. And again, these are words that people will hold near and dear that become a part of your organization. And lastly, we want to talk about the goals. Make sure that you are setting feasible goals. And your goals should be short-term and long-term. Short-term goals are 6 months to 1 year. Long-term goals are 3 years to 5 years. So your short-term goals are the goals that you should be able to accomplish in 6 months. So using the daycare example, in 6 months she wants to have her business license, she wants to have her advertising done, she wants to at least know the location she wants to be in. For her long-term goal, she wants to have at least 2 daycares open within the next 5 years. So that right there, you covered your mission statement, your 5 W's, your core values, your goals, and your vision statement. So you're ready to get started on your articles of incorporation. Okay, so we've gone over what a nonprofit is. We've gone over the scope of a nonprofit, what you can and cannot do. So we're going to roll into getting ready for tax exemption. So your tax exemption kinds of organizations, or let's say the types of organizations that can be tax exempt are charitable organizations, religious organizations, educational organizations, scientific organizations, literary organizations, testing for public safety, fostering national or international amateur sports competition, and preventing cruelty to children or animals. Those are the kind of organizations that would fall under a 501c3. Now remember, last week we went over the 501c's because there are more than just 501c3. 501c3 is just for your charitable organizations and your foundations. So that's what 501c3 is. But there's also other 501c's that you can go to last week's episode, which is episode 4, and I went over all that. Now, I want people who are in ministry to think about the wording that goes around organizations that are tax exempt, because the wording is charitable. Because it usually means it's generally accepted legal sense and includes relief of the poor, the distressed, or the underprivileged, advancement of religion, advancement of education or science, erecting or maintaining public buildings, monuments, or works, lessening the burdens of the government, lessening neighborhood tensions, eliminating prejudice and discrimination, defending human and civil rights secured by law, and combating community deterioration and juvenile delinquency. So these are the kinds of things that you are expected to combat with your nonprofit. And these are also words that the concepts are kind of biblical concepts when you think about underprivileged, the advancement of education and science. These are kind of biblical principles. They're just worded differently for the law. So you want to keep that in mind when you're creating your nonprofit. All right, so last week I got into 990N, but I'm going to really get a little more, break that down a little bit more, because last week I feel like I kind of ran through it. All right, so what is the 990N? In 2007, small nonprofits with gross receipts of under $25,000 did not have to file a tax document with the IRS. The problem was people felt like small nonprofits were getting away with murder and there was no accountability. So that's when they created the 990N, or the electronic notice, e-postcard, for tax-exempt organizations who are not required to file the Form 990 or 990 Easy. So before 2007, small nonprofits with receipts under $25,000, or your organization did not raise or bring in more than $25,000, did not have to file tax documents with the IRS. Now you do. So when you do, you have to file the 990N. All right, so what is it? The 990N is part of they changed it to address that situation. Like I said, the situation was people feel like small nonprofits were not held accountable. They kind of do what they want to do, which honestly, churches should be mindful of that as well, because this new administration kind of has that same ideology that churches are raising monies that they're not reporting, because now we have pastors who are having private jets and driving Bentleys and things of that magnitude, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that because they are laborers and they are worthy of hire. So they should be able to have nice houses and nice cars. The problem comes in is if the person who's in charge of the finances are not taking care of the books properly, which is when people really start getting in trouble. All right, so who has to file the 990N? So nonprofits with gross receipts under $50,000 must submit the 990N. If a nonprofit raises more than $50,000, then they do the 990 or the 990 easy. So it boils down to how much money your organization is bringing in. Also, remember, your 990 is what everybody's going to pull to look up information about you. So your 990 will have your mission statement on it. It will have the people that gave money to your organization. And people typically use that to decide if they want to give you money or not. So let's say that GE is looking to give money for their social responsibility. And they go, well, we want to give to an organization that helps feed the hungry. So they start looking through names. And then one of the names jumps out at them, then they go pull your 990 to go, well, I want to find out who else is given to this organization. So they're going to pull your 990, and in your 990 is going to have all your basic information and who has given to your organization. Which also brings me back to the importance of your mission statement. Once you've created your mission statement, because I cannot stress how important a mission statement is, make sure that your mission statement is someplace easily accessible on your website. Yes. Every organization should have a website. Make sure that your mission statement is easily accessible because that's what people are going to be looking for because, again, remember, it's the synopsis of your organization. They don't want to read 5 or 6 paragraphs about your organization. They want a synopsis about it so they can decide whether your organization is one they want to partner with. All right, so when do you file the 990N? The IRS expects that your 990N should be filed by the 15th day of the 5th month after the close of your tax year. So when you start your organization, you have to decide what is your tax year. So if you say it's January 1st to December 31st, then you have to make sure that you are prepared to file this on the 15th day of May. So May 15th would be your filing day if you decide to go that route. What happens if you do not file your 990N? They're going to revoke your tax exemption status. Remember, if you plan on being a thriving 501c3 organization, that means that anybody that gives to your organization can write it off at the end of the year, which is pretty much what tax exemption means. You don't pay taxes and people can write off their donations to your organization. If you get a momentum going and you do not file consecutively for 3 years, they're going to revoke your status and you're going to have to go through this whole winding process. And I don't think I have to tell anybody that the IRS is no joke. And they're not going to just give it back to you. You're going to have to go through this grueling process that nobody wants to go through. So just make sure that you file your 990N every year. Because if you do, you don't have to worry about getting your 501c, your tax exemption status revoked. Again, remember, if you do, it's going to change the game on your organization. Because no longer will people be able to give to your organization and write it off at the end of the year. Many of us say that we want doctors and lawyers and all those people to give to our organizations. They're not inclined to do that if they can't write it off at the end of the year. So make sure that you file your 990 and make sure that you understand when it's supposed to be in to the IRS. Alright, so that was the 990N, which again is important for tax purposes. There's another little acronym that you probably want to be aware of before I actually get into articles of incorporation, and that is your EIN number. Now, some of this stuff is not only for nonprofits, they're for profits as well. This is one of those terms. So your EIN number is the employer identification number, and it's a federal employee identification number, and it's for federal tax identification purposes. So again, this goes between for-profits and non-profits. And people will say, well, why do I need an EIN number if I don't have employees? Because it's still an identifier for your company, for your organization. And as a non-profit, you are still a business entity that is operating in the United States. So you have to have an EIN number. Plus, when you do your 501c application, they're going to ask you for one of your programs or services. So you're going to have to explain that program and service, and you're going to have to create a budget for that program and service. And in that program and services budget, you're going to have staff. So you're going to have to have an EIN number to account for that staff. So this is why you need to make sure that you have an EIN number, because it is important. And again, that was a nice little tidbit for those who plan on having a nonprofit and a for-profit, especially a for-profit, because you probably will have employees, because your goal again is to make money. So you definitely want to be able to file to have your EIN number. All right. So, the beauty, the articles of incorporation. Now, we talked about doing incorporation in the last video, so you probably want to go back and look at that if you need to. There's a lot of purposes and a lot of reasons why you want to be incorporated. But in order to be a corporation, you have to have articles of incorporation. Now, there are clauses that go into your articles of incorporation. Now remember, and also, there are bylaws and there are articles of incorporation. Your articles of incorporation are needed to become incorporated. So you definitely want to do that first. All right, so what are the variables that go into your articles of incorporation? Number one, your corporation name. Let me say this, because I really didn't get into names. We've been kind of doing everything else except actually naming your organization. Please name your organization something that is trendy, but not tacky. And I use that term loosely. You want to make sure that whatever you name your organization, you can put that on a letterhead. You can put that on marketing materials. You can put that on a billboard. Because, hey, I think big. So when I came up with the leadership blend, which I will tell everybody, it was blend is an acronym. It's not just blend. Blend stands for business, law, entertainment, nonprofit, decoded. It just happened to be blend, which most people don't know because I forgot until a couple of months ago because it's been that long. But in any event, when I came up with that name, I had to think about a lot of different things. You know, what are people going to think about when they see that name? Can I put that name under some symbol to create a logo? How does that look on letterhead? So you want to think about all those things when you get ready to name your organization. Plus, at this point, what is it going to look like when you put it on the top of your articles of incorporation? So you want to think about that kind of stuff when you're naming your organization. All right? So, because not everybody's just going to do corporation. Sometimes people will do an LLC. Sometimes people will do a partnership. All those different types of organizations. So you want to make sure that the name you give it is a good name. Number two, the principal place of business, which simply means where's your main location. And if you plan on having multiple locations, where's your headquarters going to be? Because you're going to have to put that in your articles of incorporation. And it's going to have to be a street address. They're not going to take a P.O. box. So you want to take that in mind. All right. Who is the registered agent? Which means who is the person that's going to be receiving all your official papers, who are going to be receiving the notices from the state, the federal government, all those things. The registered agent must be located in the state where your corporation is formed, and you must provide a physical street address for the agent. All right? So you want to think about that as well. Who's going to be the person, pretty much who's the person in charge? If everything starts going to the devil, who's going to step up and get the documents and be able to sign stuff on behalf of the organization? Or DBA, I'm going to say this because you're probably going to see this. DBA, which means doing business as. So who's going to be, the DBA, who's going to be doing business as your organization? So you want to think about who your registered agent is. Next, your statement of purpose. Some states do not require this, but you still want to have it, and basically it's a synopsis of what your organization does. But you want to be very general. So you want to say that my business purpose is XYZ. So going back to the example of Jesus Children's Daycare, her purpose could be, and this is off the top of my head, her purpose could be to provide a safe and loving Christian environment for children who want to be reared in a Christian environment and want to be in their Christian beliefs. Something of that magnitude. That could be your statement of purpose. Next is your duration. How many years do you expect your corporation to be in? A lot of states don't ask for this, but you should have it. I mean, most people incorporate an organization, they expect for it to last as long as it's going to last, to run its course. But if you feel like, you start your organization and you know it's only going to last 2 years, you can put that in your articles of incorporation, that this organization will last 2 years, and then after that it'll be dissolved, or after that it'll be changed into something else. You can put that in your articles of incorporation. Next is your authorized stock. Now, for a nonprofit, since one person cannot own a nonprofit, neither stakeholders or investors or anything of that magnitude, you probably don't have to worry about authorized stock. But if you were a for-profit, you'd want to talk about the stock options. Who's going to own it, what is the class of stocks, how many numbers of shares, all that good stuff. But again, because we're talking about nonprofits, you probably don't have to worry about stocks because, again, one person cannot own a nonprofit. All right. So next, the incorporators' names or addresses. The incorporated is the person that's doing business as. So where are they headquartered? What are their addresses? Remember, you cannot use a P.O. box. It has to be a street address, and things of that magnitude. Lastly, authorized signatures. So this is not only the incorporated, but everybody else is going to be on your board, or the people that are really going to be involved in the intricate details of your organization. So these are the people that are going to be authorized people that are authorized to sign for documents and stuff of your organization. All right, so those are all the key components of your articles of incorporation. So you definitely want to make sure you can answer those questions so you can get the ball rolling in that area. All right, so being that this is video 5, there are a couple of things I want you to be conscious of. Number one, I need you to understand the dynamics of a nonprofit, because that is the part that we're missing, especially when it comes to churches and religious organizations. We run them as spiritual entities and not natural bodies. So I need you to be conscious of what you can and cannot do legally, which is in episode 3. You know, the do's and the don'ts of your organization. Because before you can even get to any of this legality stuff, you've got to understand the legal ramifications of what you can and cannot do. So that's first. Secondly, as a wrap up, again, you want to be mindful of, you know, being incorporated, the perks of being incorporated. You want to be mindful of your legal obligations with the IRS, which is your 990N, and you definitely want to have all your 5 W's answered, because if you do, if you can get through your articles of incorporation, then you're actually over half the way to complete your 501c application. I keep wanting to say 3, but remember, there's more than just 501c3. So you're more than halfway ready to do your 501c. The hardest thing people run into is all the stuff that I'm going over in the preliminaries, the mission statement, vision statements. People never think about that kind of stuff. Do it now, because if you do it now, that's one less thing you have to do, and you'll be ahead of the game. So again, articles of incorporation, you definitely want to get the 5 W's down so you can go ahead and transfer that stuff into your articles of incorporation, and definitely understand the dynamics of the 990N. Now, of course, to me, on Mondays and Fridays, I have a radio show called the Leadership Blend Radio Show on IBNX Radio Network, airing from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Now, we just got added to Spotify, so I know everybody's on Spotify, so if you're on Spotify, you can check us out, the Leadership Blend, just like this says, except it's the radio show. But you can type in the Leadership Blend, it should come up. On that show, I have 2 correspondents with me. We look at leadership in all its different arrays, all its different forms, sizes, all that good stuff. Next, YouTube channels. There are 2. So you can watch my radio show. Yes, you can watch my radio show. You can watch my radio show on the Leadership Blend Radio Show YouTube page, and you can watch the TV episodes on the Leadership Blend TV show. So that's how much I love you guys. I give you a variety of ways to get in touch with me. For general information, and if you can't remember my name, go to ricecommunity.com. Whenever I say Rice, it is always with a W. So it's WRICE community.com. On Facebook, Ricardo Ricky Rice. On LinkedIn, Ricardo D. Rice. On Instagram, RD Rice. So yes, I'm everywhere. Everything I'm supposed to have, I have, except Snapchat. I'm not doing Snapchat. That's for kids. Anytime my 13-year-old niece is on Snapchat, I'm not getting on Snapchat. So outside of that, again, Facebook, Ricardo Ricky Rice. On LinkedIn, Ricardo D. Rice. On Instagram, RD Rice. The radio show, the Leadership Blend live radio show, airing Mondays and Fridays from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. on IBNX Radio Network. Or you can hear it on Spotify. Actually, you can go to SoundCloud. It's also there. The episodes of the radio show are on SoundCloud under the Leadership Blend. So there, and Apple Music has our episodes as well. So the Leadership Blend and its radio version or television version is pretty much everywhere. Remember, these episodes air live every Monday at 3:30 on the Now Network. Check your cable listings for show times, and if you can't catch it then, stream it on the nownetwork.org. I have to remember all this stuff. The nownetwork.org. So that's the ways you can get in touch with me. Yes, I would love to come to your church or your organization and share this information with PowerPoints. I also have a book, Calculated Conflict, that you can buy it on Amazon, Ricardo D. Rice, doctoral candidate. So yes, all this information is everywhere. You can find me everywhere, or you can send me an email if you want to be simplistic, rdrice@gmail.com. So these are all the ways you can get in touch with me. I look forward to hearing from you. Please send me your questions, whether it be on social media or through email. And you guys have a great week. And I hope you see this episode on Monday at 3:30 on the Now Network. A nonprofit ministry in itself has many different faces. So just because God has called you to leadership, it does not necessarily mean you're confined to the pulpit. A nonprofit is actually a very good way to exercise your giftings and your talents, to actually exercise the gifts that God has given you. And because with the nonprofit, not only it does it have spiritual elements, it also has natural elements. So you're able to go into the streets, you're able to go into high schools, you're able to go into hospitals, all those good places. And not to say that ministry can't do that, but this ideology that the only place you can be a minister or be effective in ministry is behind a pulpit has almost become a ludicrous theory. A nonprofit is a great way to get your point across and to affect the lives that you're supposed to affect. Because remember, we are not called to those individuals who are already healed. We're called to those individuals who are broken, who are in the highways, who are in the byways, who need to hear that sounding board. And that sounding board may actually be you. So when you're thinking about your nonprofit, think about it as a ministry. So if you decide you want to feed the homeless, what else can you do outside of put a sandwich in their hand? You know, are you praying for them? Are you giving them encouraging words and things of that magnitude? So always remember, ministry is not just restricted to the pulpit. Okay, so this comes up a lot in general conversations whenever I'm talking to any of the generations. And remember, generations are baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Millennials, and now we talk about Generational Z. The question of purpose always comes up. Well, I don't know my purpose, or I don't know how to discover purpose. Let me say this. The easiest way and the best way to get on the road to purpose is to look at your track record. When I look back over my life, I see I should have known that leadership, for all intents and purposes, was in my future, because from the time I was a kid up until now, it doesn't matter where I sit, it doesn't matter what I wear, somebody's going to spot me and I end up getting cycled to the front on some front. Most people know the story of how I got into radio and television. None of this stuff was ever in my peripheral vision. This all just kind of happened. But what happened was everything that God placed in my hand, I took the time to master. So when he told me that I was going on the radio, actually didn't tell me, he kind of made me. When I ended up being on radio, which happened in 3 days literally, I just did it. The show started on March the 6th, 2017. I was sitting on one side of the glass. My producer was on the other side of the glass. He counted down from 3. By the time he got to 1, he pointed and said, go, and the rest is history. But the objective is you have to master everything God places at your hands. Because I don't want to say master is a strong word in this regard, but because I took the time to try to perfect that he had given me, then he enlarged the territory and TV presented itself as another option. And the TV thing happened in 2 days. But the point was, everything that he placed in my hand, I took the time to learn how to be the best at it so he would enlarge my territory. And oftentimes we ask God to enlarge our territories, but we want to do international things, but we never handle domestic things. Meaning, I want to go overseas and preach the word, but I don't speak to my neighbor in my backyard. So how can you expect God to enlarge your territory internationally when you don't even handle domestic affairs? So we have to understand the dynamics of mastering those things that God has placed before us, because I don't believe in coincidences, and neither does God. Even when things don't work out for our good, he can make them for our good. So the ideology is you have to stay focused and understand the dynamics of what's being orchestrated on your behalf to get you to your destiny. So when it comes to purpose, look back over your life, even if it's 2 months ago, and you'll see a pattern. And once you recognize that pattern, then you send up a couple of prayers to the God and say, God, remove the scales so that I can understand where you're trying to take me in my life and in my ministry. And that's the final thought for today.